Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Siva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So thank you so much for joining. Just a little brief. Let me pause this. Okay. Yesterday in brief, Prabhupada finally, he started his own again magazine, right? Back to Godhead again, he started printing. Mr. Kumar Jain, he was saying that how he could come, no breakfast, nothing in the morning without any breakfast. He would do proofreading, everything. He wait until everything is done. So no food, proper food. Then after that, he would go to different houses, personally distribute. Known people or unknown people, sometimes you'll be yelled, right? Yeah, go away, no time. So he writes in this magazine that about is on that subject, no time. Okay, so maybe I'll repeat the same again. Aware responding to the resistance, polite and impolite, that he met while selling back to Godhead, wrote an article, No Time, a chronic disease of the common man, for the March 1687. When we approach some gentleman and request him to become a reader of Back to Godhead, sometimes we are replied with the words, no time. They say that they are too busy in earning money for maintaining the body and soul together. But when we ask them, what do you mean by the soul? They have nothing to reply. Dr. Magnus Saha, a great scientist, was busily going to a meeting of the Planning Commission. Unfortunately, while going in his car on the road, he died and could not ask death to wait because he had no time at that moment. Dr. Ansari, the great Congress leader, while dying in a moving train on his way home, said that he was himself a medical man and almost all his family men were so. But death is so cruel that he was dying without any medical treatment. Therefore, death has been described in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavat, as the indefatigable. Death is awaiting everyone, although everybody thinks that we may not die. There is life after death. The busy man should try to know this also as to whither he is going. This life is but a spot in his longest sojourn, and a sane person should not be busy with a spot only. Nobody says that the body should not be maintained, but everybody should know that from Bhagavad Gita that the body is the outward dress and the soul is the real person who puts on the dress. So if the dress is taken care of only without any care of the real person, it is sheer foolishness and waste of time. I was an unusual newspaper vendor. He didn't loudly hawk his paper on the street or sell it from a newsstand. He approached individuals quietly as they sat to drink tea. Or he would call on acquaintances in their offices or places of business. Taking a copy from the stack he carried underneath his arm, he would present what appeared to be an ordinary tabloid newspaper with bold black headlines across the front page. But what odd headlines, the lowest of the mankind. Philosophical problems within the social awareness, sufferings of humanity, the pure consciousness of nationalism. Anyone could tell at a glance that this was not ordinary newspaper. I would say something to try to convince them to take it anyway before they say no time. He looks like he is expert. Anyway, so after hearing the responses, his experiences, he was a good established man. Now finally he's on the road for the service to the Lord, going door to door, man to man, uninvited, giving them the, please take this, and people would say no time. So he wrote a good article on that. No time. Everybody's no time. This so many big leader, no time. Health is a doctor, no time. But death cannot wait for anyone. Death is inevitable. It can come anytime. So one must take care. It's very nicely explained. Yeah, no one is denying one should take care of the body, but the soul is also cannot be neglected. So here it says that he would not be just like saying, newspaper, like just like news journal calls us and all these things. So he would go approach very kind of a privately, looks like personally, and approach one-on-one, just like we distribute books, our devotees distribute books. And then at the same time, he would call the organizations and try to take a stack of his newspaper, not newspaper, magazine. But it has a thought-provoking titles in it.
On behalf of his spiritual master and the previous Vishnu authorities, he was playing a role, a newspaper salesman, a smiling demeanor, a gentlemanly invitation. No, it wasn't an ordinary newspaper, but they would find it interesting and it cost only 6 paisa. Thus he was extending the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, handing out the truths of the Vedas, the easy-to-take form of a newspaper. Despite his desperate poverty and the urgency of his message, his writing was never shrill, strident, or fanatical. He wrote expecting to find his reader prepared to hear sound philosophy and always willing to accept the truth, especially when presented logically and relevantly and supported by authoritative Vedic literature. Although experience on the streets of Delhi had shown him that the people were shallow, distracted, and uninterested in self-realization, he knew that most people, at least some in their lives, pondered the crucial themes of philosophy, whether God exists, whether he is a person, why they're suffering. So Abhay appealed to their higher sentiments. Spring of 1965 brought visits.
56.
Spring of 1956 brought visits from U.S. Secretary of State Dulles, and a few days later, Lord Mountbatten, the former Governor General of India, was greeted at the airport by thousands. Then came the celebration of the one sacred day of Holi, when urchins spray all passerby with colored dyes. Prime Minister Nehru toured the Delhi slums, expressing disgust at the prevailing conditions. He announced India's intention to develop atomic energy, stressing its peaceful uses. The weather warmed. A border clash began between India and Pakistan. Delhi railway workers went on a strike. Meanwhile, Abhay continued to preach. So, in summary, Abhay was taking as a role as he was taking the role as a newspaper salesman to spread the message of Krishna consciousness, and he's taken his role under the behalf of his spiritual master and the previous Vishnu authorities. And even though he was poor and he didn't have much, he still was always enthusiastic and he would always preach wherever he wanted to. And he realized that even though people here were shallow and all materialistic, he still thought that people still had these questions whether if God exists, whether he is a person, and why there is suffering. And in the spring of 1956, so many events started to happen. Big officials came, and there was a there was a strike and everything, but Abhay still continued to preach.
He somehow managed to meet the financial, editorial, and printing demands and published his 6th issue for the year of 1956, the May 20th edition of Back to Godhead. The front page carried a special notice. As a matter of principle, please read Back to Godhead and revive your deeper aspect of personality. There is nothing in it, which is our ideology manufactured by imperfect sense, perfection, but all perception, but all that it contains are message of our liberated sages. We are simply helping them to speak again to man and woman in easy language for real life. Every responsible man and woman must therefore read it regularly at a cost of very insignificant sum of rupees 2 or 4
rupees 2 or 4 per year.
Rupees 2 or 4 a year, or as 3 per month.
Wow.
Do not neglect it. It is for your interest. It will create a happy society of humanity. In How to Broadcast the Teaching of Bhagavad Gita, he talked about the need for special organization, spiritual organization in society, a model community, which he named Gita Nagari. The village where the Bhagavad Gita is sung would live by the Bhagavad Gita and preach its message to the world. Praising Mahatma Gandhi for his Vaishnava qualities, Abhay suggested that Gandhi had also esteemed the Gita Nagari concept. It was the only way of relief from the sufferings caused by demonic principled leaders who were misguiding the present demoralized civilization.
Okay, very interesting. This so looks like he got managed to print his sixth issue of the year. Back to God is 1950s, May 20. So he writes about pleading everyone that revive your deeper aspect of personality. Don't neglect. It's just a matter of 2 to 4 rupees if you subscribe for a year, or 3 rupees only if you subscribe for a month. So I don't know how. Oh, you said Back to God magazine. That's that time. And also he mentioned about if you hear is Gita Nagari. Gita Nagari is the same project. Prabhupada wanted to had a dream in the dream which he mentions, the same name he gave to Gita Nagari in Pennsylvania, actually. And almost many of you have been there. A model community, which is named Gita Nagari, the village where Bhagavad Gita is sung, would live by the Bhagavad Gita and preach its message to the world. Hope everyone understand. So what example we should see to the world? Just like a GV, is developed, we wanted to speak, but at least GV brought, as you also wanted to go to GV, it brought a good, set example, how it can be beautiful city can be made. They wanted to. So Prabhupada also had idea of Gita Nagari. People can see with a model, and still now, so many societies still coming up, but sustaining at this time. In future, it is expected that it can grow. Caused by demonic principal leaders who are misguiding the present demoralized civilization. Anyway, he wanted to have that actually. He was calculating. Huh? Okay, AJ, you can read this one.
He was calculating how to capture the restless popular imagination. He wanted to present Krishna's teachings in a clear, straightforward way and distribute them widely. He felt that good arguments from authoritative scriptures would appeal to sane, impartial, educated people, even though they claimed to be uninterested. He knew that somehow, without abandoning his gravity and his absolute conclusion, he must capture their interest. They were relegating religion to some book of scripture on the shelf that they never read, didn't understand, or couldn't believe. He brought it to them as a newspaper, yet it was as good as the scriptures. No, it wasn't what they expected in a newspaper, but they might read it. The chanting process of the holy names of God, as conducted by the propaganda of Back to Godhead, is not pleasing to the superficial pleasure hunters describing men and women in decent literatures in national news. But if it is the means of relishing the transcendental eternal life. In addition to selling Back to Godhead at tea stalls and delivering copies to donors, Abhay also mailed out free copies, both within India and abroad. For years, the vast audience of English-speaking readers outside India had concerned him, and he wanted to reach them. Having gathered addresses of libraries, universities, and cultural and governmental outlets outside India, he mailed as many Back to Godheads as he could afford. He prepared a letter for his Western readers, suggesting that they should be even more receptive than his countrymen. Although the messages contained in Back to Godhead are all gifts of the ancient sages of India who actually realized the absolute truth, yet at the present moment, the so-called leaders of India are too much enamored by the Western ways of material advancement of knowledge. They are completely neglecting the treasure house of knowledge left by the sages. So it talks about how Prabhupada realized that, there was a kind of a rise in irreligiousness, and a lot of people were familiar with the scriptures, that he was the authoritative scriptures, but they didn't bother to read them. Like you said, it's a book that sat on the shelf at home unopened, right? So he figured, you know what, if it's in a newspaper form, more people will be more likely to read it. So that's kind of why he went that way with Back to Godhead.
Hmm.
And then, it talks about how he would send them not only within the country, but he would send them pretty much anywhere to anybody he could, to outside of India, um, telling them, hey, this is actually more important for you to read than it is for my own countrymen to read. So he would send them to libraries and colleges and different government buildings all over. So, yeah.
Interesting how he could manage to send outside even though he was suffering so much of scarcity of money. Uh, Second to
Although the messages contained in Back to Godhead are all gifts of the ancient sages of India who actually realized the absolute truth, yet at the present moment, the so-called leaders of India are too much enamored by the Western way of material advancement of knowledge. They are completely neglecting the treasure house of knowledge left by the sages. You gentlemen of the Western countries have seen much about material science, and yet peace is not within your control. In most cases, you may be feeling the want of peace, although you have enough materially. This basic defect of materialism remains undetected by the misleaders of India, and therefore they are not serious about going back to Godhead, the ultimate aim of life's journey. On the home front, Abhay sent copies of his latest issues of Back to Godhead to the President of India, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, along with a letter warning of the perilous fate that awaits a society conducted by asuras. Please therefore save them from the great fall down. Abhay's letter of November 21 was outspoken. So here, basically, it says that even though the messages in the Back to Godhead is coming from the Vedic, the ancient Vedic culture, these all are messages of the sages. The many leaders in India at that point were not interested in spiritual advancement. They were all interested in the material advancement, and they wanted to mimic what was happening in the West, in America and in England. So they were completely neglecting the most important treasure of India. And when he sent those back to Godhead magazines to the Western people, he used to mention that even though they are not from the Indian background, like they'll get benefited by this and they'll achieve peace. He also sent the Back to Godhead magazine to the President of India, asking him to basically spread this movement. If not, we are going to fall down, and the only way to save is to go through Krishna consciousness or via this magazine at that point.
I have got the clue of going back to Godhead just after leaving my present material body, and in order to take along with me all my contemporary men and women of the world, I have started my paper Back to Godhead as one of the means to the way. Please don't think of me as something wonderful or a madman when I say that I shall go back to Godhead after leaving my present material body. It is quite possible for everyone and all of us. Abhay requested His Excellency at least to glance over the headlines of the enclosed 1 dozen copies of Back to Godhead and consider granting the editor an interview. There was immense work to be done on behalf of India's spiritual heritage, and there should be a specific Ministry of Spiritual Affairs for this purpose. I'm crying alone in the wilderness at the present moment, wrote Abhay, but His Excellency never replied. Prabhu, you summarize.
Right. Okay. So basically, in his letter, he's describing what he wrote. Special letter was made. It is a pleading to president that how he was. We hear Advaita Acharya Prabhu was crying to bring Lord Chaitanya. Only he can deliver, and Prabhupada is crying for the people. Pleading this, leaders, especially president. Um, how much you read? A very request, yeah. At least to glance over the headlines and then close 1 dozen copies. At least glance over it, thought-provoking request. At least you can do that. And I'm crying along the wilderness at the present moment, but His Excellency never replied. So, yeah, Prasanti.
In his Back to Godhead, Abhay was making propaganda against the atheistic view. In, in Hope Against Hope, he frankly admitted that 80% of the people he met while selling Back to Godhead were atheists. Sometimes we meet gentlemen of up to date taste and try to make them interested in the matter of Back to Godhead. They say very frankly that they have not only no interest in such atheistic subject, but also they condemn the attempt to bring back people in general to the path of Back to Godhead. According to these gentlemen, economic conditions of Indian people deteriorated on account of their too much faith in God. And the sooner they forget everything about Godhead, it is better for them. But we cannot agree with this atheistic conclusion of such up to date gentlemen devoid of the sense of Godhead. Abhay argued that although independent India was now educating her citizens in godless materialism, her economic conditions were not improving. Many Indians did not even have the bare necessities of life. He cited that 120,000 were unemployed in Delhi. Some of the well posted government servants or some of the fortunate businessmen may feel themselves happy, but 90% of their brother citizens do not know how to meet the both ends together, and therefore the economic condition is definitely not satisfactory. Prabhupada says that 80% of the people he meet are with atheistic views, and he is trying to bring a hope against the hope. And he's trying, so they are mostly interested in the material world. They think that having too much faith, they are not progressing materially, their economic conditions are not improving. So if we come out of that faith, then they can work on their basic necessities. So which Prabhupada says is completely untrue. Um, Abhay argued that independent India have godless materialism now, and he also cites 120,000 are unemployed in Delhi, and even though they became atheists, the present conditions are not improving.
It's interesting. Can you see here? It's now also the same condition. Not only no interest in such theistic subject, but also they condemn the attempt to bring back people in general to the path of back to God. Wow, that's growing day by day. That time he's saying 80%. I see many of you, some of you are getting Back to God magazine. We will make sure that I think this is a good program. We can subscribe to this as many people as. What do you think, Pranath Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. I think that's a great idea. We should
This is
maybe,
$20, 6 issues they will get, and they will do the job for us.
yes,
And
and maybe
somehow,
if possible, we should also, once a month, half an hour or 1 hour, just, read it together like this once a month.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much of labor has been put for this blood, not a liver. Okay, you can read now.
Yes, bro. So starting from he quoted or some of the posted.
Yeah, you can read some of the well-posted government.
Some of the well posted government servants or some of the fortunate businessmen may feel themselves happy, but 90% of their brother citizens do not know how to meet the both ends together, and therefore the economic condition is definitely not satisfactory. He quoted former United States President Harry S. Truman as saying that national independence means that the citizens should have a comfortable life. So, if that were the case, said Abhay, where was India's independence? His point was that all attempts at happiness and prosperity are unlawful as long as they fail to recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Lord. An atheistic civilization could never produce peace. In progressive ambition and unsatiated lust, Abhay wrote, there is no dearth of money, but there is dearth of peace in the world. The whole human energy having been diverted to this money making business, it has certainly increased the cheap money making capacity of the total population. But the result is that such unrestricted and unlawful inflation of money has created a bad economy and has enabled us to manufacture huge costly weapons for destroying the result of such cheap money making business. The authorities of big money making countries, instead of enjoying peace, are now engaged in making important plans as to how they can save themselves from the modern destructive weapons. And as a matter of fact, a huge sum of money is being thrown into the sea for making an experiment on such dreadful weapons. Such experiments are being carried out not only at huge costs, but also at cost of many poor lives, binding thereby such nations in the laws of karma. Stop here, bro.
If you want, you can read more.
No, no, it's okay. I was just asking. That's fine.
You can read.
Those who unlawfully accumulated money would find it snatched away by taxes for wars and other agents of illusory nature in the shape of medical practitioners, lawyers, tax collectors, societies, constitutions, so called sadhus, famine, earthquake, and many such calamities. A miser who hesitated to purchase a copy of Back to Godhead by the dictation of illusory nature spent up rupees 20,000 for a week's ailments and died at the end. A similar thing happened when a man who refused to spend a paisa for the service of the Lord spoiled rupees 30,000 in litigation affairs between members of the home. That is the law of nature.
Hmm.
Hmm. So, it's a where there is no a godless civilization is never going to have peace, Prabhupada says. And the true independence also means that, all the citizens are prospering, and not just a few section of, very successful businessmen, but everybody is. And, and we will fail to bring peace and happiness to the citizens as long as we don't recognize that the Lord is the proprietor of everything. And also, there's so much money. It's not that we don't have money, there's so much money there, and it's not helping us, giving us peace in this world. There's so much money being thrown left and right into so many activities, so many weapons are, these nuclear weapons and all kinds of weapons are being built. But
South,
Uh, but
South,
no peace. Yeah.
South China example. Now,
What,
uh,
Prabhu?
the South China Sea, something right now.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Mm.
I was wondering, you are showing. I was wondering if you want to fight, why are you going to water? If you want to fight on land, why are you bothering all this fish and everybody? I don't understand.
That,
Basically,
but they are experimenting there. Yeah, yeah.
so they are going to win or not?
No, no. With all these weapons, bro, you see how what they blast, the damage it does, what effect it has. You know.
But one experiment is there. But at this time, South China, I don't see. But some alerts I get from news. They say, okay, look at South China. They say everybody's all U.S., China, India, and Japan, Australia. They all are gathered and throwing. I don't know whether throwing bombs or not. They said, "You're fight in the land. Why are you bothering the fish?" Anyway, I just wanted to see. So
Mm.
all the money they're wasting in the water. What Rupa writes here, actually, same thing. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to share
No,
from
it's
that.
thank you, Prabhu, for saying. And either ways, if we don't use it on the Lord, as we hear again and again, so that if we don't use the Lord's money in Lord's service, then it's going to be snatched away. One day it will be snatched away, whether by fair means or unfair means, it's going to be snatched away from us. And we're all bound by the laws of nature and laws of karma. And how this is another example that we oftentimes spend so much money for so many things, but for maybe even getting a book, buying a book, or for some little bit service to the Lord, sometimes we hesitate to spend money. And we see this, so many things. People spend $100, $200 going to the restaurant once or twice a month. For $10 for a book, they hesitate, which is for our spiritual benefit. And Prabhupada, yesterday also I was reading, in the second chapter, 46 or 47th of the Bhagavad Gita. So much money, still they are misers.
Mm.
Prabhupada calls them misers. They have a lot of money, but they are misers. 246 or 47, I was reading this.
Is there?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu, I'm here.
Yeah, worker. Yeah.
A worker in a New Delhi post office, noticing the title of the magazines Abhay was sending abroad, took the opportunity to argue his atheistic opinions with Abhay. Srila Prabhupada. The postmaster was an Arya Samaj, and he was talking to me about the paper Back to Godhead. He raised the question, if we do our duty nicely, then what is the use of worshiping God? If we become honest, if we become moral, do not if we do not do anything which is harmful to anyone, if we act in this way, then what is the need of this? Because our paper's name was Back to Godhead, he was indirectly protesting what is the use of propagating this philosophy of Godhead if we act nicely. That is Arya Samaj's view, how to avoid God. So I replied that if one is not God conscious, he cannot be a moralist. He cannot be truthful. He cannot be honest. This is our point of view. You study the whole world just on these 3 points: morality, honesty, and dutifulness. But if he is not God conscious, he cannot continue such things. To revive all these good qualities in society, you first have to invoke God consciousness. A Delhi man noticing Abhay distributing Back to Godhead remarked, "Where is Godhead? Can you show me God?" Abhay replied to the challenge, but he also pondered a deeper reply as he moved throughout the city during the day. On returning to his room, he began an article, "Where is Godhead? Is it possible to see him?" In the Secretariat buildings in New Delhi, there is an inscription on the stone that liberty does not descend upon a people, but it has to be earned before it can be enjoyed. Actually, this is the fact that we have seen it, that much sacrifice had to be rendered by the people of India before they could gain Swaraj. But in the matter of Godhead, some irresponsible people ask, where is God? Can you show me? Have you seen God? These are some of the questions put forward by some irresponsible men who want to have everything very cheap. If for attaining a temporary false sense of liberty in this material world, so much labor and sacrifice has to be re-questioned, is it possible to see Godhead, the absolute truth, so cheaply? To see God means complete liberty from all conditions. But in Godhead and attending orderly so that he may be present at my command. The atheist, however, demands like that, as if Godhead is his paid servant, and he thinks that Godhead is an imaginary thing. Otherwise, he would have appeared before us as soon as the demand to see him is made.
Mm.
So this is Prabhupada's discussion and explanation of answering the atheists. And one of them happened to be the Arya Samaj, the worker who was at the post office, who noticed Prabhupada's magazine. He took that opportunity to argue, taking the atheistic side, and saying that, if we do our duty, what is a need of worshiping God? And this is Prabhupada's answer to that. And then also the other question that was raised by one of the person on the street was, where is Godhead? Can you show me the God? Um, and then that question made Prabhupada come back and start writing an article on where is Godhead and is it possible to see him. And Prabhupada also explains how people take God so cheap and so casual, but and he compares it with Swaraj and the writings on the Delhi Secretariat, which shows that liberty does not descend upon people, but it has to be earned. So if just the Swaraj, which is in the material world, we think it as liberty can be attained, cannot be just attained like that, but it has to be earned, then how difficult or how hard it is to see the God, how much we should struggle, how it is not cheap, is what Prabhupada is explaining here.
So everyone knows that, isn't it? And for AJ, I'm saying Arya Samaj is their impersonalist.
Yeah.
They don't accept now form of God. But at the same time, what you're preaching, they're against deity worship. Why do you have, you can work? You work hard, work honest, work everything, but why do you have to worship God? And the same looks like until now also same thing. Why do you have to worship God? Everything, there's so many efforts needed, but to realize God, to see God, according to people, there's no endeavors, and there's no endeavor needed. Everything can come automatically. So that's the symptom of this Kali Yuga. Okay, who is next? Cyclone Prabhu, you read it?
Yes, Prabhu, I read it.
Swatimataji, read, please.
One time, while he was walking on a scheduled street, pursuing his back to Godhead duty, a stray, a stray cow, the kind commonly seen wandering the streets of any Indian town or city, suddenly charged him, growing his side with her horn, and knocked him down. At first, he couldn't get up, and no one came to help him. As he laid there, he wondered why it has happened. Summer came, and the 110-degree heat made it almost intolerable to spend time out of doors. Hot, dusted, laden winds blow in the city streets. Street side however, closed their businesses during the day. In the early May, during 112-degree heat, a man collapsed in the street and died of heart stroke. But Abai ignored the heat and ordinary limitations of the body. One day, while delivering the back to Godhead to various addresses in the city, Abai suddenly began reeling, half unconscious, overcome by the heat. At that very moment, an an acquaintance of his, a man he had approached during his preaching, happened to be passed by in his car, and he took Abhay to a doctor. The doctor diagnosed him as a victim of heat stroke and ordered him to rest. On June 20th, Abhay produced the eighth consecutive fortnight's edition of the year. Its front page article condemning both materialistic family life and false renunciation of the family life. It had been almost 2 years exactly since he had left his home and take to the Vanaprastha order, and his
Lord.
and his comments on family life seemed autobiographical as well as scriptural. He quoted a statement by Prahlad Maharaj from Srimad Bhagavatam.
Let's see how much is there so you can. Okay, one more person can do it. Okay, you can summarize now.
Yeah, you can summarize better.
Oh, I can do. Thank you. I'm glad you didn't read for 2 pages. Okay, so here, such a condition. It's described what is condition, unbelievable condition, right? It sounds like, appears like can be a homeless beggar in one sense, and so much of struggle. He was, pushed by the cow, sadly charged a cow, stray cow. Prabhupada wondered why this happened. Anyway, so 110-degree in Delhi, I can believe. Do you know what is? I spent 6 months. I don't know if anyone on our group in Delhi here. So I spent 6 months in Delhi before I came to SSA. I got relief from this Delhi. So hot. I never know. One day I went to the bank in this heat in the bike. Next day I was in fever, and still he did it. During a man collapsed in the street and died with heat stroke. That time also it used to be that heat, looks like. And another day, Abe also suddenly, Prabhupada also fell unconscious, but somehow somebody took him to doctor. That's one thing. On June 20, Abe produced the 8th consecutive the edition of the year, condemning both materialistic life and false renunciation of family life. So, in spite of all this thing happening, he's been continuing to write. I hope we are seeing the sacrifices. It's really awakening for all of us. This point, it's not a story. It is a contemplation for us how we got Krishna consciousness because of the sacrifice of such personalities. So our appreciation, gratitude can increase day by day. That's what I see from myself, actually. Okay, Vijayan Prabhu, please.
On June 20, Habib.
And this one you did, right? Oh, no, go ahead. Yeah.
On June 20, Abe produced the 8th consecutive fortnightly edition of the year. Its front page article condemning both materialistic family life and false renunciation of family life. It had been almost 2 years exactly since he had left his home and taken to Anaprastha order, and his comments on family life seemed autobiographical as well as scriptural. He quoted a statement by Prahlad Maharaja from Srimad Bhagavatam. Persons who are always disturbed in mind with cares and anxieties of household affairs may quit off the place, which is the black hole temporary abode, family life, to kill oneself and take shelter unto lotus feet of the personality of God by entering into the forest. And he admitted the management of a family is more difficult than that of an empire. But trying to avoid family life by living in the jungle without the real spirit of renunciation was monkey renunciation. In the jungle, there were many monkeys who lived naked, ate food, fruits, and kept female companions. The real remedy lies in the acting of accepting the service of the lotus feet of the Lord. That makes one free from all cares and anxieties of life. That makes one able to see God always and everywhere. Real renounce to life, therefore, was possible without going into the forest. Even if one remained in the dress of a householder, he could be freed from cares and anxieties by engaged himself in devotion service. On September 1st, US President Eisenhower condemned the Soviet secret testing of a nuclear bomb equal to 1 million tons of TNT and scoffed at the Soviets' claims for peace. In the Middle East, Egypt's Nasser nationalized the operation of the Suez Canal, causing an international crisis. On September 20, 81 nations met at the UN to form a new international agency to help tame the atom for peaceful purposes. Abe saw some of the headlines and heard talk of the latest news from gentlemen he visited. He frankly told them that without Krishna consciousness, the promises of cooperation by the politicians were all phantasmagoria. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had said that if only one soul could be turned into a pure devotee, his mission would be a success. Yet sometimes Abe became overwhelmed when he thought of how small he was, how much work had to be done on behalf of Krishna, and how difficult it was to convince even one conditional soul.
Okay.
So this chapter ends with like saying how much progress Abe made. Like he had this 8th consecutive fortnightly edition of the magazine, and it contains the article about renouncing the family life as well as condemning the materialistic life. And it has been like almost 2 years which he left the home and took the Vanaprastha order. And it also tells about like persons who are always disturbed in mind with cares and anxieties. Anxieties may quit the place, which is the black hole, which is the temporary abode, to kill oneself. And he also admitted that management of the family is more than that of an empire. But like people who are trying to avoid the family life by just moving to the jungle without the spiritual thoughts, it's not the right thing to do. And he compared with often like a monkey renunciation, where the monkeys in the jungle, who are like wandering in the jungle and like living with the female monkeys. And he is also saying like the real remedy lies in the acceptance of the service to the lotus feet of the Lord. And there was also like several like things happening in the world, like several material news, like Soviet Union testing the nuclear bomb, and the Egypt making the operation of the nationalizing the operation of the Suez Canal, and also like the United Nations was formed. So all these things happened in the world. And on seeing everything, Abe was like frankly telling to the people that without Krishna consciousness, the promises of cooperation would not be possible. And also, he also remembers his spiritual master saying, like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So he was telling like, if he can turn at least one pure soul to a pure devotee, then his mission will be a success. But still, Abe thought that felt that how small he was, and more work he has to do in Krishna consciousness, and how he also understood that it is not that much easy to convince even one conditioned soul. So it ends like this.
Krishna, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I was mute. Thank you so much. So with this, we finish the chapter 8, New Delhi, crying alone in the wilderness. Such a experience. Maybe we can do a little reflection later, but we'll begin the chapter 9, which is a resident of Vrindavan. Wow, finally, some soothing news will come from Prabhupada. But it's all this journey so far. He's a resident of Vrindavan. I was sitting alone in Vrindavan, writing. My god brother insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. Without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So he insisted. Not he insisted, practically my spiritual master insisted. He wanted me to become a preacher, so he forced me through this God brother. You accept. So unwillingly, I accepted it. Brothers, please read.
Yes, Prabhu. The passenger cars behind the locomotive moved forward almost silently. Thumping at a slow rhythm over the tracks, the train pulled out of the station, past ferry freight yards, a neighborhood of run-down tenements, the old Delhi fort, the garbage dump at Nizamuddin, with its hundreds of crows and vultures flying overhead, and then past a marble-domed red sandstone mosque. Sitting in a third-class compartment, his luggage stored beneath his seat, Abhay could see factory workers walking near the tracks, carrying their lunches in metal tiffins, and then the factories, surrounded by huts of mud and straw. He passed the thatched roofs and tarpaulin tents, the cow dung fires that smoked in the morning air. The tall stacks of the Indraprasth electrical powerhouse spewed out a different smoke, and sooty black clouds poured back from the locomotive. He saw red and violet wildflowers blooming from bramble bushes at trackside, and beyond he saw the road to Mathura with its border of fruitless kikar trees. It was the morning train to Agra, and there were few passengers. Abhay would be riding as far as Mathura and then traveling by Tanga to Brindaban. He had ridden widely the Indian Railway, especially in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, when he had traveled on business in Bengal, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Andhra Pradesh. He had been to Brindaban several times. In his childhood reveries over the train timetables, it had been the first place he had thought of visiting. His first visit in 1925 had been but a brief pilgrimage while he had been in nearby Agra on business. Then in 1932, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur had been in Vrindaban on parikrama. That had been a memorable visit. Abhay had heard him speak at Koshi, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had marked him. He likes to hear. And then at Radhakund, 3 years later, he had been with his spiritual master again. But he had never gone like this to live there. Dressed in a simple white dhoti, his hand in his bead bag, fingering his japa beads, he looked out the window quietly, chanting the holy name. So it's a wonderful pastime where Prabhupada is now heading towards Vrindavan, and the typical atmosphere of the old Delhi Nizamuddin station has been explained here, and then how as Prabhupada is crossing all the streets and all kinds of smokes from the factories are coming up, and then he reaches Mathura, and it is said all over India, and he has been going to Vrindavan at that time. The dates are mentioned 1925 and 1932. The second time he went to meet Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur, and that very famous pastime happened where uh, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, I guess, he came up and he said, that now, because there was a camp by Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur, it was a yatra, and Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj came and he announced that, that Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur is going to give a class. So those who want to hear class, they can stay here. And there is another group which is going for a pilgrimage, for the yatra of Vrindavan. So Prabhupada stayed back, and that was, that impressed Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, that he likes to hear. And then he got his initiation at Radha Kund. 3 years later, he had been with his spiritual master. Okay, he was only after 11 years of meeting, that is after 1922, in 1932, he got, I guess, like 11 years, right, Prabhuji? He got
Yeah,
initiation.
yeah, he took a little long.
Little long,
Yeah,
yeah.
very long.
So then that's how it's so wonderful that he met again Bhaktivinoda Thakur at Radha Kund, dressed in a simple white dhoti. Though a good businessman, he dressed in a simple white dhoti, his hand in his bead bag, fingering his japa feet. He looked out the window, quietly chanting the holy name. So it's wonderful memories of Prabhupada.
It didn't say how why he started his journey to Vrindavan, but anyway, I don't
Yeah.
know. I thought it'll come. Okay.
Mhm.
The train passed to the dense thickets of Faridabad um, and into the agricultural fields. So this is still describing his journey to Mathura. So the train passed to the dense thickets of Faridabad and into the agricultural fields with the interspersed patches of wheat, dal, and sugarcane, beginning at trackside and stretching for half a mile to the dry, uncultivated land that continued as far as the eye could see. I'm amazed to see that uncultivated land that time also. When I go to Orissa, there are a lot of uncultivated land also at this time. The train spread faster. Rural villages drifted past the window. An hour out of Delhi, the land was mostly flat and open, dotted with small villages. Occasionally, he would glimpse a striking old temple, but mostly it was the land now barren with a few palm trees, now cultivated with irrigated fields under the expanse of the blue sky and blazing sun. For a long time, Abhay had wanted to take shelter in Vrindavan. Now there was no obstacle. His purpose remained the same. He would write back to Godhead and deliver it to the printer in Delhi fortnightly. As long as he could afford to travel, he would return to Delhi to distribute back to Godhead. But he would live in the shelter of Vrindavan. He had in mind the room at the Vamsi Gopalji temple near Kesighat, a rooftop room that commanded a view of almost all the Vrindavan. And since his 1953 visit from Jhansi, he had kept in touch with the temple manager. So now we are hearing um, that his journey, the scenery, how he sees this. Now I also like to see what's the windows of the train. Train is my favorite um, ride. My family don't like. So he's noticing how things are happening, how the land is not being cultivated, all these things. But he's happy that he's going to Vrindavan fine. He has already has in mind Vamsi Gopalji's temple near Kesighat. I don't know how he has, but how he will end up with Radha Damodar temple. So we will see more from there. Okay, somebody can read one or two. Ajay, you please go ahead.
Sure. Starting with in moving to Vrindavan.
I think so, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yes.
In moving to Vrindavan, Abhay was following his predecessor's spiritual masters. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Bhakti Vinoda Thakur had their house at Radhakunda and had preached in Vrindavan. Gorakishore Das Babaji, Jagannath Das Babaji, Vivanath Chakravarti, and Narottama Dasa Thakur had lived either in Vrindavan or in Navadip, near the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya and his immediate followers had an especially intimate relationship with Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya had commissioned Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami to uncover the places of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan that over the centuries had become lost. Rupa and Sanatana had left their prestigious government post and gone to live in Vrindavan. Dressed in simple loincloths, they had lived without fixed residences, staying each night under a different tree. They and Jiva Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, and Gopala Bhatta Goswami, known and worshipped as the six Goswamis of Vrindavan, had compiled a voluminous literature on Krishna Bhakti. They had inspired wealthy Vaishnava patrons to erect Vrindavan's greatest temples, Govindaji, Madana Mohana, Radha Damodar, Radha Ramana. Okay. At Radhakunda, shortly after Lord Chaitanya's departure from the world, Raghunath Das Goswami had chanted 100,000 names of Krishna and discoursed for several hours daily on the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. There also, Krishnadasa Kavaraja had compiled the Chaitanya Charitamrita, describing the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So this kind of talks about, again, the significance of Vrindavan throughout the history of Krishna consciousness, and a lot of the stuff we touched on in the last reading of Chaitanya Charitamrita, and just the different pastimes that took place in Vrindavan, and how the Rupa and Sanatana Goswami were tasked with kind of revitalizing the places of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan.
Thank you. I just wanted to share one thing here, that in reality, Prabhupada was not think about his physical condition, bereft of any money, no proper food, no proper dress. But I can assure that he was not feeling morose because of that. We all know his moroseness is an unhappiness because he could not make any sincere devotee or anybody like that. Because that's the mindset. That's why all these examples are coming. Because all these great personalities, they found Vrindavan as a treasure place, and they gave up the worldly comforts, any kind of comforts they had. And they simply lived in very, very simply in loincloth and everything. So Prabhupada has already in mental, he's living that like that already. So it's my understanding that he never had lamentation that I don't have anything. I think his lamentation is he could not, yet he's not successful in doing that. Second.
Even those Gaudiya Vaishnavas who did not live in Vrindavan kept Vrindavan always in their hearts and proclaimed its glories. The Chaitanya Charitamrita describes the great ecstasy of Lord Chaitanya, the great ecstasy Lord Chaitanya felt while traveling from Puri to Vrindavan. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind was absorbed in an ecstatic love at Jagannath Puri, but when he passed along the road on the way to Vrindavan, that love increased 100 times. The Lord ecstatic love increased 1,000 times when he visited Mathura, but it increased 100,000 times when he wandered in the forest of Vrindavan. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was elsewhere, the very name of Vrindavan was sufficient to increase his ecstatic love. Now, when he was actually traveling in the Vrindavan forest, his mind was absorbed in the great ecstatic love day and night. He ate and bathed simply out of habit. Vrindavan is the earthly manifestation of Lord Krishna's eternal spiritual abode, which the Lord himself describes in Bhagavad Gita. There is another nature which is eternal, and it is transcendental to manifested and unmanifested matter. It is never annihilated. It is the supreme destination. When one goes there, he never comes back. That is my supreme abode. Krishna's activities of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, and his abode, Golok Vrindavan, are described in many Vedic literatures. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desires in abodes built with spiritual gems, where he is surrounded by millions of purpose trees and always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. So here, we read about the great ecstasy Lord Chaitanya felt while traveling from Puri to Vrindavan. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was just when he hears the name of Vrindavan, he would go into in ecstasy. When he was in Jagannath Puri, when he was on the way to Vrindavan, that love increased 100 times. And when he was in Mathura, it would increase 1,000 times. But when he was in the forest of Vrindavan, it would increase 100,000 times. So, so here it says that basically, and in Vrindavan, it is a verse in Bhagavad Gita, which is mentioned here, that there is the Vrindavan, the Golok Vrindavan is eternal, and it is transcendental to manifestation and manifestation. It can never be destroyed. It is the supreme destination, and if anyone goes there, he never comes back, and that is Golok Vrindavan. And also here we read about the activities of Lord Krishna in Golok Vrindavan, where he is tending the cows and yielding all desires, and where he is surrounded by many purpose trees, and always served by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis.
Yeah, basically, in summary, as he's approaching Vrindavan, his joy is multiplying, manifold, Prabhupada. I hope that's the whole essence from we are getting. He's meditating. He becomes so joyful that he's approaching Vrindavan. And that's why we are getting all these examples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how he felt, Acharya, how he felt. So Prabhupada's heart is becoming very jubilant as he's slowly approaching to Vrindavan. Jyoshna Mataji.
Although Lord Krishna's about Goloka Vrindavana is far beyond the material world, when Krishna comes to earth, he displays his eternal abode in the Vrindavana of India. That 84 square mile tract in North India is identical with the eternal world in the spiritual sky. To live and die in Vrindavana guarantees the devotees transfer to the eternal spiritual world. The residents of Vrindavana, even the animals, are exalted. At the end of life, they will transfer to Goloka Vrindavana. Lord Brahma therefore prayed that he might take birth as a clump of grass on the outskirts of Vrindavana, so that these pure devotees would purify him with the dust from their feet. And Vaishnava Sastras declare that even by only a brief visit to Vrindavana, one can realize the Supreme Lord in his heart. Yeah. Basically, it's saying the Vrindavan in India is similar to the Golok Vrindavana. It is identical. The 84 square mile tract in North India is identical to the real Goloka Vrindavana. The people who lived there, even the animals, they are all exalted. At the end of life, they will be transferred to Goloka Vrindavana. So Lord Brahma also prayed to take birth as a clump of grass. So on the outskirts of Vrindavana, so that the pure devotees will purify him from the dust of their feet. Even the Sastras, Vaishnava Sastras declare a visit to Vrindavana can realize anybody who visits Vrindavana can realize the Supreme Lord in their heart.
Yeah, we must go with devotees, okay? We must go with devotees. Anyway, thank you for reading this. The glories of Vrindavan is described here. How Lord Brahma was aspiring that, he might take birth as a clump of grass. And that's the poesy. He's ruling whole universe, but still is finding in front of his Brahmaloka, in front of the Vrindavan. Brahmaloka is nothing, so he's aspiring. Let me take care. Really, actually, this is genuine desires. Okay, genuine aspirations actually, and we must contemplate and aspire. See, that's our symptom of advancement. Anyway, I really thank you. It's 8:43. We finished the chapter 8 and started the chapter 9. very, very grateful. Any comments, anything you all can share tomorrow in the beginning, we can do. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Guruji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Haribo.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Good night.
Good night.